If you were granted a space untouched by time, a space that would survive your death, the death of your children, and the fall of your civilization, what single sentence would you carve upon the edge of forever? Intro: The illusion of permanence. Messages are being inscribed inside Bitcoin. But this was never a built-in feature. Yet, they continue to appear, like digital ghosts rising from the cold, unyielding code. Look around you. Everything we believe to be permanent is, in fact, evanescent. We live in an era of digital fragility. We trust our clouds, our servers, and our encrypted hard drives. But the history of our records is, in truth, a history of inevitable forgetting. Stone erodes under the relentless wind. Paper turns to ash in the blink of a fire. And the digital data we rely on today, it is but a flicker of a phantom, a fragile illusion that vanishes the moment the power is cut, or a single server is decommissioned. We are building the cathedral of our civilization on a foundation of shifting sand. If you were granted a space untouched by time, a space that would survive your death, the death of your children, and the fall of your nation, what single sentence would you carve upon the edge of forever? In the heart of the machine, a piece of paper has appeared that time cannot touch. A small crack has formed within the monolithic structure of Bitcoin, and people have begun to inhabit that crack. Someone tried to block it. Someone else tried to break through. History, in the end, is a war of records, the final scream of humanity hidden behind the veil of a global financial system. The 80-byte secret, OP_return. Today, we step into the forbidden sanctuary where time has no power. Chapter 1. The Library in the Digital Dark Age. To be human is to be finite, and because we are finite, we have a primal, desperate hunger for the infinite. Think back to the Sumerian clay tablets of 5,000 years ago. Think of the Great Pyramids, the stone steles of ancient emperors, and the grand lost libraries of Alexandria. We have always chosen recording as our ultimate act of defiance against our own mortality. But time is a patient predator. No civilization has ever truly defeated the slow erosion of history. We are now entering what historians call the digital dark age. Our records are more brilliant, more vast, and more accessible than ever before. Yet, they are the most fragile records in human history. Our memories are held hostage by corporate servers, protected by passwords we will eventually forget, and stored in formats that will soon become obsolete. They are temporary files, subject to the whim of power, capable of being erased with a single silent command from an invisible authority. If a massive solar flare were to strike the Earth tomorrow, the digital history of the 21st century would be wiped clean in a heartbeat. Our existence would become a myth. But in 2009, an architect named Satoshi Nakamoto threw a ledger into the world that no one could burn. A massive network of truth replicated simultaneously on tens of thousands of computers, from the glass skyscrapers of New York to the quiet basements of Tokyo. As long as a single node remains powered, as long as one person keeps the ledger alive, the data within it becomes an iron record, a digital diamond that can withstand 1,000,000 years of pressure. People called this money. They saw it as a tool for trade, a hedge against inflation. But the poets, the rebels, and the philosophers looked at the structural hidden side, the hidden side of this system. Beneath the shell of currency lay a piece of paper that would never decay. They didn't just want to move value. They wanted to move meaning. They wanted to leave their own traces on this immortal canvas, to prove they were here. But this human instinct soon began to collide with the architect's cold, perfect design. Chapter 2: The Architect's Wall and the Rebellion. Satoshi Nakamoto was a relentless perfectionist. To him, Bitcoin was a mathematical masterpiece, a pure currency that had to function with the absolute precision of a cosmic clock. This door was never part of the original design. He believed that for the system to survive, it had to remain lean, efficient, and focused. The blockchain was a sacred ledger for transactions, not a digital landfill for personal graffiti. He watched with growing concern as early users began to experiment with the code, pushing its boundaries. He knew that if anyone could write anything, the network would eventually collapse under the weight of its own data. It would lose its structural integrity. In 2010, Satoshi drew his sword. He manually disabled and neutralized the early scripting features that allowed messages to be left. He was the gatekeeper, and he was closing the gates to protect the temple. Bitcoin is not a data store, he warned the world. Then, he locked the door, handed over the keys to the community, and vanished into the shadows of the internet. And then, something strange happened. The architect was gone, but the residents of the system he left behind were not finished. They were like plants growing through the cracks in a concrete sidewalk, impossible to suppress. They found the microscopic gaps in the walls Satoshi had built, behind the payment addresses, in the unused spaces of the public keys. People began to force their messages into these narrow, suffocating spaces. The Bitcoin network began to strain under the pressure. Unintended data piled up like rust on a pristine machine. Transaction speeds crawled, and the developers grew worried. Satoshi tried to close the door. We opened it anyway. This was the Decentralization War, a head-on collision between the architect's philosophy of purity and the user's instinct for expression. Finally, in 2014, the remaining developers realized they couldn't stop the tide of human nature. To save the system from being broken by hidden, dirty messages, they decided to grant the people a room of their own, a small official controlled space. This is how OP_return was born. Just 80 bytes. It is a compromise between Satoshi's obsessive security and humanity's tireless, messy instinct to be remembered. The smallest, yet most significant territory of freedom was officially carved into the heart of the world's most powerful network. Chapter 3: Entombed Souls and the Weight of Truth. Inside Bitcoin. Block 138,033. Lives a portrait, preserved in the cold light of the code. It is a meticulously rendered image of the genius cryptographer, Len Sassaman. The world lost him far too soon, just as Satoshi's final silence began to settle over the world, like a heavy fog. His grief-stricken colleagues chose the most certain way to ensure his memory would outlast us all. They didn't build a statue of stone that would eventually crumble. They carved his image into the heart of the blockchain, a place where neither authority, nor fire, nor time could ever reach him. The departure of Satoshi and the passing of Len Sassaman. Is this portrait the final trace of a creator merging with his own machine? Or is it a digital monument built by those who missed him atop the temple of Bitcoin? In a world that forgets so easily, this 80-byte face remains unblinking, watching the blocks pile up. But this space is more than a graveyard. It is a battlefield for truth. In 2018, when a forbidden testimony was being systematically scrubbed from every server and every social media platform by a powerful government, the people refused to be silent. They chose to inscribe the silenced truth onto the Bitcoin blockchain. No army could march into the code. No censor could reach into the block. The truth was preserved, unchangeable, unyielding, and eternal. This is not just a record. This is defiance. To some, it is the record of the moment a new life began, a child's name, forever etched in the stars of the ledger. To others, it is a final message left for a loved one, a digital "I love you" that will outlive the person who wrote it. To many, it is a never-ending question hurled at an absent creator. Do not dismiss these 80 bytes as digital graffiti. Just as ancient humans left handprints on the walls of dark caves, shouting into the void, "I was here." These tiny bursts of data are the most honest, most desperate proof of existence modern humanity has ever produced. Chapter 4. The Symphony of the We. Why did Satoshi write "we" instead of "I" in the white paper? Now, at the end of this journey, that final piece of the puzzle becomes clear. Satoshi designed the perfect hardware and walked away into the night. He gave us the engine, but he did not decide where the ship would sail. Satoshi's silence was not an absence. It was an invitation. A deep, cold, inviting silence into which our collective voices began to flow. OP_return is the culmination of decentralization. It was born from the friction between Satoshi's design and our struggle to speak. Upon the immortal stele that Satoshi erected, hundreds of millions of us across the globe are carving our own names, our own stories, and our own truths. In doing so, we are finally completing the system he began. Bitcoin is no longer just a way to move money. It is the ultimate domain of human freedom. It is the only archive of memory safe from the destruction of time, requiring permission from no one. It is our collective shout against the dying of the light. Chapter 5. Your sentence, your soul. Even at this very moment, blocks are being stacked. The ledger is growing, one 80-byte fragment at a time. Even while you were watching this video, someone's truth was admitted into eternity. This isn't money, it's a record, and that record will continue, long after you are gone. I ask you once more, if you were granted a space untouched by time, a space that would survive your death, the death of your children, and the fall of your civilization, what single sentence would you carve upon the edge of forever? Satoshi gave us the system. We gave it a soul. Bitcoin mystery. It's not a game to find Satoshi's identity. It is a journey to find the one sentence you will leave behind in the face of this vast, unyielding history. We are all Satoshi.